Actually, I'm just gonna walk around and see if we can get started with fire.
1, 2. Two, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Gavin. Oh, hello, hello. Can we get everyone closer to the front? Shh. Please make your way closer to the front. There's some more chairs up here if you'd like to sit down. We're going to go ahead and get started. Oh, that was nice. Thank you, guys. All right, all right. Thank you guys for being here. My name is John Standring. I am the president of the Coastal Housing Coalition. If you are a board member, can you please raise your hand? If you see someone with their hand raised, this is a completely volunteer board, so thank you all you guys. I really appreciate you guys being here today. You did not come to hear me speak, but I do want to give a couple words of encouragement. We're at a point in our community right now in which I think that the conversations we as the coalition have are really important. There's private sector, there's the public sector, there's people who want change, don't want change. When we go through today, we have some really great panelists. I really encourage you guys to engage, ask them the tough questions, not too tough, otherwise we'll ask you to leave. But ask the questions and think about, I always like to use the term, how do we get more people to have equity in our community? There's a lot of really familiar faces in here, new faces, and I encourage you guys, when you're seeing the presentation today, to be engaged and make sure you come back and see me at the bar if you need more to drink. And again, thank you guys all for being here. And I'm going to hand over to Craig Minus, who's our executive director and also today's moderator.
All right, thanks. Thanks, John. Gavin, do I need this one or I'm okay? Thanks, everyone. Hi, my name's Craig Minus. I serve as the Coastal Housing Coalition's executive director. Thank you for being here. Just real quick, a little bit plug for the Coastal Housing Coalition. Like John said, it's a volunteer board. We are an advocacy group. We spend our time doing education, policy advocacy, and project advocacy around workforce housing. We don't love that term, but we advocate for those folks that struggle to afford the median rent or the median home price in our town, but they make too much money often to qualify for subsidies. Largely the backbone of the economy. The missing middle is another term that has been used. And we think that's an important voice because, we believe in affordable housing, capital A, affordable housing subsidized, but there's a voice for that. We really think that there's not a voice for the missing middle, and so that's what we do. We put on events like this to keep the community educated, and so we really appreciate you guys being here tonight, and hope you enjoy our program. Let's see. Thank you, Helena Mason Art Gallery. What a cool venue, huh? We didn't charge you for food or drink, so you're required to buy a piece of art. They're all for sale, so again, if you like anything, walk home with it. Again, John, thank you for your leadership as a president, and thank you, rest of the board members. Thank you. We have a lot of jurisdictional staff here. We have a lot of decision makers. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Housekeeping, bathrooms are over there. Food's in the back, drinks you guys found. I want to remind any AICP folks here, we have certification credits. Thanks to the AICP and Central Coast Planning Association. Let me see if I can get that there for you. A little small, but that's the number. And then the last plug is that we are excited to host again the Santa Barbara Housing Conference. This year is going to be on December 5th. It's a Thursday at the Carrillo Rec Cen. Just like it's been in the past, we'll have more information coming out on that about sponsorships and attendance tickets, but it's going to be a fantastic program again. Okay, so let me get into it. Where do I want to go? Okay, we are talking about ADUs. I hope everyone knows what that is, but accessory dwelling units. We call this program Success or Stress. ADUs have been around for maybe 7 years, probably strong for the last 4 or 5. And so we wanted to take a time out and see, are they working? What's coming up? I'd love to hear some real live stories about ADUs that have been put on the ground, and hear kind of, are they working to address our housing needs, or are they just kind of a gym or an extra office that people are building? So we're going to get into that. I want to just kind of lay out that we have a presentation format. I want to keep this completely interactive, so if you guys have any questions during the presentations, raise your hand. There will be Q&A at the end, but again, if you're dying to ask a question, we want to hear that. We want to be interactive. Let's see. And we're going to, again, touch on 3 points. One, kind of background of ADUs, kind of a report card to date. We're going to hear kind of some real-life experiences about, ADUs have been built, and then we're going to end it with kind of what's on the horizon for ADUs. So I'll turn it over to the panel quickly here, but just by show of hands, is there anyone that's built ADUs? In the process of building ADUs? Hope to build an ADU? Okay, good. Just wanted to kind of get a gauge there. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike Becker. We have Mike Becker's with SBCAG. They've completed a very in-depth report. It will be available, I think, later in October. But they looked at the county and looked at kind of the production of ADUs and dove kind of deep into that with respect to, how big are these things? How much are they costing? Who's living in them? Are they being rented? How much do they cost to construct? So we're going to see a lot of that. And then Kristen is with Anacapa Architecture. Ellen's with Ellen Bilstein Architecture and Planning. And they'll kind of dive into some examples that they've done for clients. And then Ted is with the City of Santa Barbara, and he's the lead on looking at the pre-approved ADU program. So we're going to hear an update on that, and then kind of press them on what else might we want to do to improve ADUs in the community. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Becker. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Craig. And I'm curious, out of everybody who raised their hand for they have an ADU, did anybody out of that subset receive a survey in January or February? All right. Did you return it? Thank you. My name is Mike Becker. I'm the Director of Planning at SBCAG, and I'm here to talk about the survey that we commissioned and wrapped up in a report. But I want to give credit where credit's due. It's unfair that I have to represent this because it's really Mia Lewis's project. Mia, raise your hand. There you go. So Mia put her heart and soul into this, and I'll talk about it. So if anybody doesn't know who SBCAG is, talk to me afterwards. I don't want to go through that now. It's probably 50-50 in the room, but I'm happy to explain who we are one-on-one or to small groups afterwards. But we're primarily a transportation agency, and we do have a small role in housing. And so with the housing work that we do, I'm sure just about everybody in this room has probably heard of RENA. RENA starts with SBCAG. The state gives SBCAG, or the region, Santa Barbara County in our case, a number of housing units for an 8-year planning period, and it's through SBCAG that we determine where those housing units go in terms of what jurisdiction do they go to. And then what you've read about in the news for the last year or so is the jurisdictions accommodating that in their housing elements. We also do other planning that's related to housing. Our regional transportation plan considers housing. We do a growth forecast of population, employment, and households, how the region's growing and where it's growing. We have administered a variety of planning grant programs for housing-related projects. And then we also do data projects, such as what I'm going to talk about here in a minute, but curious if anybody has seen or heard of the League of Women Voters housing project. So SBCAG is taking that over, and so that will become, the League did South County, so we're going to make it all county, and it'll live on with SBCAG. So that's kind of some of the work we did. Now more specifically on this project, Craig mentioned it, but it's currently a draft, so we're a little bit early in terms of sharing it, and If you want to see the report, if you're clever enough, you can find it through our advisory committee agendas. Otherwise, you'll find it on SBCAG's website after the board approves it in October. Every year we ask our member agencies, the cities and the county, if there's any projects that you want to see SBCAG take on. And a survey of accessory dwelling unit owners was one of those. We hired a professional surveying firm that is actually local, a Santa Barbara firm, though they do projects nationwide, Robert D. Niehaus. And very professional surveying is what they do, and you can tell that that's what they do. It was really a pleasure to work with them. And I do know that the city of Santa Barbara had a survey done for, I think it was just a rent survey at some point in time, and Robert D. Niehaus did that as well. And I mentioned some of those planning grants, and that's what funded this. So the survey went out to the owners of accessory dwelling units in January and February. I think that may have trailed off into March. So it's a snapshot in time. So we have to date it because some of the numbers we talk about, the date's going to matter. And at that time, we've learned that there was about 3,300 legal ADUs in Santa Barbara County. So there's probably more. So these are the legal ones. Unfortunately,
So that's, I mean, the 3,300 is what was permitted, right?
yes,
Okay.
permitted legal on the books with
In the last 5-ish something years?
yeah,
Or
though Ted may talk about it, but I know that a lot of the initial post-2017 ADUs were bringing non-conforming units to conforming standard or making them legal.
Okay.
But what was also interesting is out of those 3,300, there's 2,900 people own them. So there's more units than there are owners, and I think that goes to people who are landlords with homes adding ADUs to add more doors on their property. We received 252 responses, and it would have been 251 without you, so I thank you, which gave us a margin of error of plus or minus 6%. So now I'm going to go through a variety of the data points that came out of this. And I organized everything that in threes. So the first number is countywide. So that's the 8 cities plus unincorporated county. So Guadalupe to Carpinteria and everything in between. The second one is southern Santa Barbara County. So that's Gaviota to Carpinteria. And the third number is city of Santa Barbara.
And the cheat legend's on the bottom, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's on the bottom of every single slide. So that's what we're looking at. So, and I will highlight a couple things. So the one thing that as you go through this, if there's a big disparity, like there is here, for 2+ bedroom units between countywide and South County, that means the North County is carrying the weight there. So, there's a couple insights that we can have, and this is one. So, in southern Santa Barbara County, we have a higher number of studio ADUs. 1 bedrooms is about equal throughout the county, but the 2+ bedroom ADUs are more popular in the North County. And I think when it comes into use, you'll see that more of them in the north are actually being used for housing. So if you're trying to provide beds for people to sleep in, more bedrooms helps. So an ADU can be attached to a primary residence or detached. You can see the percentages of A being attached, and then how are they attached. So again, a couple more. I want to get out of, I don't want to throw a shadow on the screen. So again, we got disparities. So it's higher in the North County. So this is countywide. About half of the attached ones are converting garages, but it's a lot lower in the South County, which means it's much higher in the north. In addition to the existing unit, about equal. And then converting existing internal space, it is higher in South County.
Do these include JADUs?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, we didn't. That we have the 250 or 252 responses, so they're all together, and yes. And then this is interesting here. So the use. So what is it being used for? For long-term housing, the city of Santa Barbara and South County, 59% add in the vacancy, got 60%. Countywide, it's higher, which means it's much higher in the North County. So in the North County, they are building them for housing. In the South County, there's more reasons why people are building an ADU.
And so that's 35 to 40% are using it as an office or another bed. I mean,
Bedroom, guest lodging.
okay, they're
yeah.
not. Does that mean they're renting it? Long-term housing? Is that
Yes, it's
renting?
being rented long-term.
Okay.
It's about 60%. So, and then who are they renting it to? And this gets real interesting. So unknown means it's the landlord and the tenant did not know each other before this relationship was established. So that's, you can call that market rate. So if you take 40% times 60%, that's roughly 25% of ADUs are market rate housing, market rate for rent housing. And then you have the other, who else are living in them? The owner frequently lives in them. In South County, it's about 20% of the time it's the owner, and they're probably renting out the primary unit. And then friends, family is also a significant part of who's living in them. And I think it's the next slide. Yes, I have the rents. So remember, this is a snapshot in time. And if you've been paying the same mortgage for 15 years, these numbers are going to mean nothing to you. But on the next slide, I will date it. So you have some of them, they're not paying any rent. So this is any rent, yes. So 65% are charging rent. The ones that are not, it's either friend, family, or the owner's living in it. But this gets interesting here is, so this is not friends, this is family relative compared to market rate. How much does it cost? And you can see countywide, it's about 50% subsidy. It's not being provided by the government. It's being provided by the owner of the ADU to rent that to a family member. And despite the fact that that family member would be living somewhere. So there is a lot of value in this and a lot of value in providing subsidized housing. And then we had, by number of bedroom, you could see, and then the one thing that was kind of interesting that came out of that is the detached units have about 25% premium on the rent, which you might expect. So this is where we tie it to a date. So within the RENA process, we provide housing, or housing is grouped into 4 different categories. And the yellow one that should be very low, low, moderate, above moderate. And this comes from the state. It's the range of incomes here is 30% of a monthly income for these 4 income categories. Above moderate is 120% or higher of the area's median income, 80 to 120, 50 to 80, below 50. So,
I mean, when I look at that, I mean, I will tell you, like, we advocate specifically for workforce, so probably the blue and the kind of brick-looking color.
yeah.
You know, when you look at that rental rate, I mean, that is solely kind of in the workforce affordability level, and I would argue that those are, you know, probably under or substantially under kind of a market rate, maybe apartment or you know, studio that's built.
Right, and when we looked at the size, I think the sizes were comparable to an AUD unit.
Yeah.
Yet, yeah, I agree with you. These are coming in, showing a little bit lower. But again, most of these, especially in the South, are studios and 1 bedrooms.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is what they are solving. They're in the South County and Santa Barbara, it's the upper end. In North County and Santa Maria, they are providing more low-income housing or modern income housing. And that's, if you follow the news on the RENA and the housing elements, these income categories, they're the same ones. So this moves on to why did somebody choose to build or develop an AUD or a ADU? A lot of them, rental income. Interesting again, countywide is higher than South Coast, which means that North County is double the variation. Living space for friends or family, so that could be they want to move a parent in or a child or adult child into a space. I don't know, extra space for owner, which that be the owner may want to move into it, or they may just want a home office or a gym, and I called that addition with a kitchen, and increase the home value. So you could see that the South County and Santa Barbara are, a little bit higher for those spaces, for those. We did, in our pre-meet discussion, we learned that this value is extremely low, and I think it's getting washed in with all the like garage conversions, but the architects can talk more about what it cost, how much, how they received the funding to do it. This surprised me. People used their savings more than I would expect to build, and then across the county is about 2 years to go from concept to completion, and we did ask, what's the biggest challenge? Obtaining permits was the #1 answer across the county.
Well, I mean, that's interesting because didn't the state implement ADU to hopefully expedite?
Yes,
permitting?
to expedite it, yeah. So if we
Well, I'm in the permitting business, so it's good news for me.
he has a
but-
pocket full of cards. Yeah, so I just wanted to put this kind of, the theme was success or stress, and I would highlight this was a question that was asked, which I believe it means this is success. #2 was, we are providing a lot of housing with these that would need to be accommodated elsewhere otherwise, and there's a lot of subsidy built into it. The stress or the negative I would see is basically, especially in the South Coast, you got to build about 1.8 of these to get one housing unit. But that's all I got, and I'll pass it on.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
Hi everyone, I'm Kristen. I'm representing Anna Kappa tonight, and I put together a quick slideshow just to show a variety of different types of ADUs that we have kind of put together. I think I tried to show a big breadth of different ADU types on different size properties. So bear with me, I have a couple of slides and I'll try to move quickly through them. This first one is one that we did in the coastal zone of Santa Barbara. You can see it's a pretty large property. The ADU is kind of pushed a little bit further to the corner. And the long-term use case of this one is actually meant to be more for friends and family for the owners, but I think that they've always thought about it as, as their family grows and expands, that this could be the place where maybe their kids move out to, or, we've always kind of think about these as, what is the short term, what is the long term, and I would say that one thing about these ADUs is that it could solve a multi-generational housing need for property owners. So this ADU was designed as a 2-bedroom with a 1-bathroom. I apologize that this plan's a little hard to read. And one thing that, through the planning and permitting process that we were kind of forced to do, and I think the city is addressing this now, is that we were kind of forced to do 2 concurrent applications. This was, the overall project was master planning to create a new single-family residence on the property, demolish the existing, a new garage, and then the ADU. One thing that we found very frustrating that our clients had to pay for was that duplication of permitting packages and the additional complexity and confusion, I would say, that the city themselves had with understanding what was going on where. With stormwater ordinances and things of that nature, obviously those things are not completely separate. There's always an intertwining. This shows some of the elevations of the project. It is a very modern residence. There's some of the conceptual renderings kind of looking out towards the view. It's a very beautiful property. And you can kind of see where the ADU is in construction. The residence is a little further along in this photo. Another ADU that we have been working on for a very long time looks incredibly simple on paper. This is a property in the county of Santa Barbara in Montecito, and it is a property with a house that was built in the 1920s. What you can see on the graphic on the right side is the red indicates the setbacks on the property, and you can already see off of this one how much of the property was existing non-conforming. So what we embarked on with the challenge of adding an ADU to this property, which is, I'm not sure if, there we go. It should be located above this little garage.
Yeah. This one's a little brighter.
I'll use both there. So the goal was to do an ADU above this garage and to renovate the structure. We also approached adding some additional development to the site with a pool. But this all triggered what became a 2-year modification process in order to get the permission to build this structure.
But aren't ADUs supposed to be processed in 60 days?
They were not in this case, and that was actually only for the entitlements portion. So we actually just obtained the permit of this one. We started the project in 2019.
Were you doing revisions to the existing primary house?
We were, but the ADU permit is the one I'm talking about just having come through in June.
Okay.
So this gives a little snippet of like what the existing conditions of the property were and where that ADU is going. It's a very humble structure in the sense of it's built above an existing garage. It is 350 square feet. It's a studio. I think that kind of lays the groundwork for how complex this ended up being. This was an ADU that both Planning Commission had to approve and MBAR, so they loved that opportunity. And here's a snippet of what we ended up designing, and it's currently in construction and to be wrapped up in April.
Did they require any of the upgrades on the original house in order to do this? Or?
No, not in that case. We were kind of required to treat this as a little bit, it's again, there's that complexity of like the intertwining of the project. The main house fell under this like significant, substantial improvement determination where we didn't have to conform to absolutely everything. But on the garage we had to. This is, after the mudslides in Montecito, flood control kind of created a new base flood elevation, so there's a lot more scrutiny and improvements that had to happen to the structure to support the ADU as a result of that. Another small ADU that we created, and this is just a little bit more of a smaller footprint site, and I think it's kind of telling. This was designed on a property in San Roque. It was originally conceptualized and thought of as a renovation of an existing garage that you would access off of the street and kind of park behind the house, which is an inconvenience and not the best solution of the, original designers. We decided to reprogram that with an addition here, and then we also added additional scope to add and create a new one-car garage for the owners to kind of replace some of that parking. Even though we weren't required to do that with I would say the overall project and taking away their garage, it was an add to the family. This again is another example of how we had to do 2 separate permitting packages for this one. And the result was a very small ADU. It has a little bedroom, had a little storage gym area. I know we talked about gyms, so bathroom and then a living area.
So are they using it for their primary house or are they renting that?
They actually thought about this a little bit differently. Their family, they're transplants from the East Coast. So for them, this became like, this is where our friends and family are staying. They had 2 young kids at the time. This is where the family comes to stay, watch the kids for them, et cetera. I think, but thinking about it as like, this is also insurance in the future. If we build it and we need to rent it out, we want to do it in a way where, we can do so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a consultant, and so I help a lot of people through ADUs, and that's a theme that I hear. I've done a number of ADUs for clients that, maybe are in their 40s now, they have the kids at home, but they're looking at like 10 years when they're empty nesters, and perhaps they move into the smaller ADU, and they rent the bigger house out, and that, they have a landing pad, maybe they're traveling more. So it is interesting to see how people are approaching ADUs from a life planning perspective. Yep.
I got a question. You said 2 permits.
Yeah.
Can you give me a shot on what the price of those permits were?
Oh, I don't recall 100%. I think the ADU permitting fees ended up around $20,000, but and the other permits were, around that much.
That's an incentive money.
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
Can you elaborate on why you have to do 2 permits versus just submitting 1 application?
It's something that I think Ted can probably speak to as something that the city has found as a way to streamline. In the past, we were asked to keep development completely separate. So it's like even if we were doing this as like a, you can tell that there is improvements, that the parking lot's going away, we would have to show it in its almost like existing, environment as like there's driveway meeting into this, and like we're ignoring all of the site development around it. And I think it was just to allow maybe the planning and city building staff to really focus in on exactly what they're supposed to look at, because they weren't supposed to look at anything else outside of that envelope.
I'll give you an example. In cases, ADUs, often you have a maximum of 1,200 square feet. In some cases, it's 800, kind of depending on what lot you're at. But, you know, I've ran into clients where they want a garage plus the ADU. And if they're maximizing the ADU at 1,200 square feet or 800, they can't do a garage in that square footage. And in that case, you often have to get a separate land use permit for the garage. So, you know, in hindsight, while we're supposed to streamline ADUs, and again, the ADU piece of that does get streamlined, but now they're having to go through the traditional process with a land use permit for the garage, or if they have a bigger like patio than they want, you know, that's limited too. So, you know, I don't see it's like, it's not completely easy, because most of the time ADUs want to have additional amenities to them, and those get routed to the traditional planning route.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to steal your thunder about those.
God, Craig. No. Here are some visualizations of the property that we created for it. And I think one thing that's pretty telling about this one is, you know, it's a small lot, and it is sharing outdoor living space with the primary residence. And it's something that the owners very much acknowledged, and they realized, you know, like maybe creating a completely private barrier in the future, in the case of wanting to rent it out, is something that they'll have to negotiate. And I think in their minds, they've always thought about it, okay, when we reach that vote, like, we're gonna make sure to get that friends and family, someone that we don't mind, you know, sharing the amenities with. And I think on smaller lots, you have to be able to share them. Here's some in-progress construction photos. Unfortunately, we didn't get this one professionally photographed, but Mark from Shoreline's in this photo. Mark, thank you. We have another one that I think this is just a fun one to kind of show a little bit about the process and the way that our team thinks about these ADUs. This is a conceptual project on the Mesa in Santa Barbara. And I think what's really interesting and fun about this one is was conceptualized as a renovation of an existing little ranch, plus some additions and a new ADU. And the beauty of doing these types of projects, where we can kind of think about it as a holistic master plan — this is the main residence, this is part of the addition, a new garage and primary suite, and the ADU tucked in the corner — is that it allows you to really think through how the use cases go through and can create a pretty beautiful, I would say, cohesive design all the way through. The last little ADU that I want to show, and I'll step back, sorry, Ellen, I'm talking so much, is one that we did in, I'm going to call it Nolita, but this is another complicated one where we also had to do separate permitting paths. It was, this ADU was meant to be attached to the main residence and kind of share this roof line. We also went through a big process here to do a detached ADU and situate the ADU originally in the yard to kind of like give a little bit more breathing room to this portion of the house. But with the floodplain on this property, there's a creek running on the backside. We would have had to construct that detached ADU to conform with, obviously, FEMA floodplain. That meant that we would have to construct an ADU that's about 5 feet above the finished floor of the residence, which the owner was not willing to do. Instead, we reapproached the project to do this extension and addition, and as part of this, we did an addition to the house that extended this gable, so that's this part in the middle, and then attached the ADU to that. So another project where we had to do 2 permitting paths of showing the first addition and then hinting at what was being attached to it later. But it was a fun little one that was, I would say, probably a little bit more complicated with the documentation than it was in practice. And it likely needed to be, just because we found that sometimes city and county staff don't often talk to each other, and different staff gets assigned to 2 permit projects on the same property. So.
Some stress, right? ADU stress.
A little bit of ADU stress.
So our firm also does a fair number of ADUs, builds in architecture and planning. I've brought 2 different examples today to show you just to show different configurations of ADUs. And I think as Kristen very effectively showed you, there are all different arrangements of things that are possible. They're attached, they're detached, they're conversions of existing residential space, conversions of garage, etc. So this particular example is a garage conversion. So this is our site plan overall. The street frontage is along this side. This was the original garage, two-car garage for the house, which is back here. And so this we thought was going to be a very straightforward process. It is within the coastal zone, and so it required a coastal development permit that we didn't realize at the beginning was going to be required, and certainly added to the timeline. I think Mike's information about the duration of a lot of these projects is very accurate. I'd say, you know, on average, we're seeing our projects take roughly a year from design through permitting, and then probably a second year for the construction to be completed. So in this case, we were...
Ellen, let me stop you there.
Yeah.
So how does that compare to like a non-ADU duration?
I'd say it's very comparable.
You think so?
For the
So there's
scope.
no savings?
Well, maybe Ted will speak a little bit
Okay.
more to this, but my understanding, you know, and we wondered about this for a long time ourselves, and then clients are always asking us about it. Whatever happened to the 60-day permitting rule? And the understanding that we got through city planning staff and HCD was that the 60 days represents the time period for every round of plan check that the project goes through. It's not from the beginning to the end. It's just for that round of plan check. So that's pretty comparable
That's a stress.
to what
I call that a stress.
we're familiar with on just standard construction. So in that sense, we're not seeing that it's that much quicker to get ADUs approved.
Thank you.
So this was the garage. The garage door was along here, right? So now we've just taken this piece and we've blown it up bigger to show you the floor plan of how the ADU found its way into this existing, basically 20 by 20 structure. There's an existing plumbing line along this edge of the site. So we gathered all of the plumbing elements to this side of things. So you're, you know, always working with existing conditions in these situations. So the bathroom, the washer dryer, and the kitchen are all gathered on this side of the space, and then sleeping area here and living area there, with an outdoor living space outside of it. So we were able to carve out in the larger site plan, as you can see, outside of the driveway, some outdoor living space, in addition to the front yard setback. So our entrance is directly off of the street, so that when this is currently rented out long-term, this tenant is not needing to do much of anything on the rest of the property. So the owner has, you know, the run of all of this back here, and the ADU is really focused in that direction. As Kristen was saying, you have to get creative, especially with very small properties, how to, you know, make it a really nice place for both entities to live, and orient things in such a way that they all feel that they have their, you know, nice outdoor space and so on. These are a couple of photos of the end result. So there's that front door coming off the front yard setback. So that's a new door, obviously. And then these rafter tail ends are over the garage door, which turned into a series of windows, like you see here, and in the sleeping area of the studio. So we just repurposed the old header in that garage and put large openings there to enjoy the outside, and then did very selective other new openings that weren't originally there. Here's a picture of the kitchen tucked in there, the kitchen from the other side, from the vantage point of the living room, and then the bathroom tucked back in the corner.
Do you have any idea how much this cost to build?
How much it cost to build? It was around $650 per square foot.
Okay.
And you would say, well, you know, the structure is there, it should be very inexpensive, but multiply that by 400. So, you know, there's not that many square feet, thankfully. But as several of the contractors we work with have explained, the problem with ADUs is they're generally small in overall square footage, but the expensive parts of what needs to be built, the kitchen, the bathroom, et cetera, are still there, and then you don't have very much, you know, other space to kind of help balance
Yeah, a
it
hallway's
out.
cheap to build. A bedroom, generally, if you're already building it, is
Right.
cheap to build.
Which in a typical house, you have much more of those less expensive areas to build, and you still just have the one kitchen and a bathroom. So anyway, these on average actually tend to be more dollars per square foot than standard construction, and not because it's overall more expensive. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You just have more expensive parts
Thank you.
to build.
And it depends on the level of finish, right? So
Sure.
Yeah, I mean,
something with people products for 500
Right.
versus 1,000 if you're importing stuff from Italy, right?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. The other thing, of course, when you're converting a garage to an ADU, you've got a lot of work to get it up to speed just by converting the use from something never intended to be inhabited. Now you've got to insulate the walls, you've got to tear up the slab to get new plumbing in there. So there's a lot of retrofit of a garage to make that work as a house, as a living space, ADU. Whereas if you were building that from scratch, you wouldn't necessarily have that much labor involved. This is the second of the two ADUs we'll be showing you tonight. So this is a multi-family property, that being the overall site plan. Street is along this side, and units A and B were previously there and were rentable apartment units. So because of that, there's a section of our local code that allows us to build in a multifamily situation, which this just was, because it was two, not one, places for people to live. We were allowed to propose 2 detached ADUs from the existing construction. So there had been originally a small garage back here that was not serviceable anymore. They weren't putting anything in it or parking in it or anything. So that got demolished to make way for these 2 new units, C and D. We played through a lot of scenarios about how to position these things and settled on the idea that angling them, because of the limited dimensions of the site, actually gave more substantial outdoor living space for each of the units, each of them having these nice sort of triangular outdoor spaces instead of just a long skinny space that was rectangular. So these are the plans. So, you know, obviously we took the kink out of it to show you this plan, but those are the same things at a different scale. Again, we concentrated plumbing along the shared party wall between the 2 units. All the plumbing's there, bathroom, kitchen, washer, dryer, etc. And then the same on the opposite side of that shared wall. And then the living spaces adjacent to the outdoor living, bedroom area back here, and then living space out there. And we replicated it just to be as efficient as we could be. They have slanted roofs to kind of make a small space feel bigger than it really is. And then these are a few photos of the end result. So a lot of glass, cheerful front door, you know, small spaces, but tried to do as much as we could with a little bit of
is this in the
area.
city or the county? Or
This is city,
the
yeah,
city?
city. It's near San Andreas. It's one of the little side streets.
And they didn't have to match the architectural style of the
They
other
did not.
houses?
No.
Okay, that's
Mhm.
interesting.
Yeah,
So you
right.
could be playful with it still.
Exactly. Yeah.
No parking requirements?
Correct. No parking requirements. It's very near a bus stop, so that wasn't required. That being said, we did maintain parking for the site overall in this area, but by taking away the garage, you don't have to replace the parking on site, but there is still on-site parking because this is bikes and trash and another outdoor living space here, and the main circulation onto the property is a pedestrian path that way and then into these 2 units. So yeah, back to
So that's
this.
probably like a 50 by 100 lot? I mean, 5,000 square feet. Now you have 4 units on
4 units.
5,000 at
And
the ground level.
And
yeah.
all 1 story, right? There's no amount of 2-story. Even the original 2 units, A and B, were 1-story units.
So the 7,500 minimum square feet is a bygone era for multiple? It used to be, kind of, on a lot?
Not familiar with that.
In order to do R2, R3, or R4, R2, add that, so I mean, this is, I just wondered.
Yeah, this was as long as you maintained the setbacks and provided outdoor living space and parking that you could do more. So there you have it.
Any idea on the cost on this? Around the same 650?
So these
per
were
square foot?
new construction, and so those were on the order of 700 a square foot.
Okay. Thank you, Ellen.
Mm-hmm.
What was the bit of code that allowed you to take advantage of multifamily on the site?
Ted, do you know that section? I don't know it off the
It's
top of my
basically,
head.
For multi-unit, there's a provision that allows you to do up to 2 detached, what the city calls special ADUs, but it's really the state mandate 800 square foot, 1-story detached ADU. That's pretty much allowed on any lot, anywhere, so including multifamily. No, it's different. It's just the ADU state law.
If you're zoned multifamily, that's available to you.
It's zoned multifamily, and you actually have more than 1 unit built
Correct.
on the ground.
Yeah.
If you have 1 thing built there, then you don't get to do, So it's like zoning versus reality.
Yeah, and I mean, to go beyond that, we won't go into this rabbit hole, but even if you have, a multifamily property, say you have 12 units on there, I think there's a rule that you can do up to 25% additional ADUs, so.
That's right.
What would that be, 3, right? 25% of 12? So if you had tuck under parking or something, we've done projects where we convert tuck under parking to new ADUs. So there's some creativity out there about getting additional density into existing lots. Thank you, Ellen.
Thanks, Ellen.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm Ted Hamilton-Roll. I'm with the City of Santa Barbara. I'm a project planner in the design review section there. Excited to be here tonight and to talk a little bit about what the city is doing to increase ADU production. All right, so tonight I'm going to go over a little bit of the regular ADU permitting process, and the main thing I want to talk about is the pre-approved ADU program that the city is rolling out in response to a new state law. So we're going to see a sneak peek at some of those pre-approved ADUs that are in process right now. And I'll talk a little bit about what might be next for ADUs coming down the pike. So this image is from the city's website. There's this really cool site that's like a GIS dashboard, essentially, that our long-range staff puts together. And this shows all the ADU permits in the city since 2018. So you can go there and see how many have been completed.
How many is that?
In total, this is about 1,100. You can't really see the font, but the blue represents building permit issued. So that's the number that we currently have issued that are under construction. Green is C of O, or Certificate of Occupancy Complete constructed. That number is 580. And there are 239 that are pending right now that are in the plan review process. And if you actually click on that link, you can see over time how many have been completed by year. So
that I mean, roughly that's almost 200 ADUs per year.
right around 200, 250 a year. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. That's a great question. I don't know off the top, but I would say, based on this map, I mean, here's the coastal zone, you know, pretty small, relatively small percentage.
When you say plan review, Ted,
Yeah.
when you say plan review, do you mean building permit or do you mean total ones that also incorporate into planning review?
Meaning that those are active applications. So either building permit applications or planning applications, whatever they're subject to. All right, and I'd like to highlight too, one of the stats we saw from Mike's report was that 40% of applicants said obtaining permits was one of the biggest challenges to getting an ADU. And you know, we see that at the city. When you're stressed, we're stressed, believe me. So that is where, and one reason for the stress is aesthetics. So the city of Santa Barbara has 3 design review boards that look at aesthetics of new buildings. 85% of all ADU applications are exempt from any kind of design review, meaning that they go through what's called a ministerial process, which means that they're subject to standards. And if you meet all those standards and check all those boxes, you're good to go, you get a building permit. And that includes these 11 ministerial design criteria that are, you can't see them in this handout, but they're in the ADU ordinance and they're on this page here. Essentially, the point of this all is to make sure that ADUs are compatible with the development that they're proposed on in terms of architectural style, size, et cetera. And
it generally wants the ADU to look like the primary, right? I mean,
in general, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, that's one of the stresses on our end, is that sometimes about 15% or so of the ADU applications have to go to design review, either because they don't match the main house, or because they're in the front yard, or another reason. So that's where AB 1332 comes in. That's the state law that requires local agencies to create a process for the pre-approval of ADUs. And that's what we're doing right now. We're going through a process to get some pre-approved ADUs done. The law allows for pre-approved plans to be available on local jurisdictions' websites, and they'll include, a rendering, a floor plan, some information about the ADU, and then the designer's contact information. So the idea is that interested ADU builders would be able to go to your local city or county's website, click on an ADU design that you like, see if it's available where you are, where you want to build it, essentially, and contact the designer and buy the plans from them and proceed from there with the designer. This is a good thing because it provides an express lane for ministerial approval of ADU applications, and it lowers project costs by reducing permit fees and hopefully reducing some of the consultant fees as well.
What if the aesthetic of the pre-approved ADU doesn't match that existing house?
It gets approved. Yeah, basically you get to bypass design review.
Sure.
Yep.
Repeat the question, please.
She asked if a pre-approved ADU has to match the main house, the design style of the main house, and the answer is no. So that's one big benefit, huge benefit of a pre-approved ADU.
Can you touch on, will that shrink the timeline of approval? Will it go from 2 years to a year? Or?
Yes, I'll get to that in a sec. Basically, it's 30 days and instead of the 60-day deadline, but I'll talk more about what that means in a sec. So for the city's pre-approved ADU program, we elected to limit the parameters, the design parameters, to a detached, one-story, max 16-foot height, 250 to 500 or 250 to 800 square foot ADU, basically the same as a detached special ADU or the state mandate ADU that's required, that can basically be built on any lot. So the benefits of choosing a pre-approved ADU, first one is that design review is already done, meaning that even if your ADU design doesn't match the main house, you don't have to go to design review. You can go through the ministerial permit process, which is supposed to be expedited. Speaking of expedited permitting, it's supposed to be a faster plan review, so 30 days instead of the current 60 days. And what that means is it's basically like you get 60 days, the city gets 60 days for each round of plan review. But what the legislation actually says is the city has 60 days from when the city receives a complete application, meaning that all the information that's needed to permit the ADU is on the plans and documented in the application. So 60 days from a complete application is the timeline in which a local agency must approve or deny an ADU. The pre-approved program reduces that to 30 days. The idea being that if an ADU plan is pre-approved, it's already gone through design review, it's already gone through building code review. Basically, we just need to plunk it down on a site, make sure it meets setbacks, make sure it meets height, and it's good to go. Unfortunately, so far, this hasn't reduced permit fees, or we don't anticipate it to reduce permit fees by a whole lot. We're estimating around a 25% discount with going the pre-approved route. So that's still a little bit of savings, but really inspection fees take up a huge portion of that. Where a regular ADU that's detached could take about $20,000 to $25,000 in permit fees, a detached pre-approved ADU could take something between like $11,000 and $15,000. So there is a good, a good chunk of change that you're saving there.
Ted?
Yes.
Is this considered like prefabricated, off-site ADU, or are these all custom built?
The question was whether this includes prefab manufactured ADUs or if it's all site-built. This process doesn't discriminate between the two, so you can get either pre-approved. Probably the biggest thing that I hope that this program introduces is more certainty in the process. So not only will you have faster plan review times, but you'll know, hey, this ADU plan has already been vetted by my local agency, it's good to go. I'm pretty sure I can just get this done and apply for a permit and get through the process easily. So I'm really hoping that that is one outcome of this program, is that we have more happy customers.
Will this take into account like civil or SOLS reports and things like that?
Great question. Yes, it does, and it can be site specific. I don't want to get into that too big, but yeah, there are considerations with the type of foundation that you need, the slope, if there's any grading that needs to be done.
So you'll still have to do full civil and grading and figure that out in SOLS reports?
Potentially, yeah. I will say these designs are going to be a lot easier to use on a flat lot than on a sloped lot or on a lot that has geological issues like erosion potential.
I know the city has a solar ordinance where
Yep.
you can't block the solar access to your neighbor. Do you see this becoming?
No.
No, you don't. Okay.
Because these are limited to 16 feet in height and they have to comply with a 4-foot setback, it's pretty much guaranteed that they're going to meet
Understood.
solar. Yeah.
Did you say 4-foot setback?
Yeah. 4-foot setback for ADUs.
Are there any objective design standards affecting these?
I don't know. Question was, are there any objective design standards affecting these? Not that I'm aware of, and yeah, the city's been going through a design review process looking at each one of these proposals individually.
So when they finish that, will I have the option to do a tile roof or like a shingle roof, or is the roof that you have on these pre-approved plans the one I have to use?
Yes and no. So for this particular design, and I'd like to shout out Adam Stickles, he's in the audience. Yeah, he's right over there. He designed this. This is one of the ones we're anticipating that'll be pre-approved citywide. This is a Spanish style. It's offered in a 2-piece tile roof currently. Other applicants have chosen to provide different options on the plans, and so you might have a traditional style ADU with a shingle roof and basically the same floor plan, footprint, and everything in a craftsman style with like a slate roof or something like that. So essentially, what you see is what you get when it comes to these plans.
How many plans does the city have in process now to approve?
We have 6 applicants currently. We're anticipating, I hope they all get it completely pre-approved. I think they will. But this is an ongoing program. So we're going to reopen the call for submissions in 2025, and hopefully that number just keeps going up.
Are there very many 2-bedroom
There are a few, yeah.
We've got a couple questions.
I see.
Do all of these have to be foundations?
Yes.
Do they be more like mobile homes?
No. No, they have to be built on site.
Why is that?
That's a good question. Yeah, I'm not a building code expert, but I'm assuming it's because they have to meet building code.
That's a technical question for
I think-
after the presentation.
Yeah.
I think I could weigh in on that. I mean, the construction still needs to meet code, right? It needs to meet building code. So for seismic to work, you have to carry all the loads of the structure into the foundation appropriately for the soil condition. So there's no getting around the building code on any of these. They have to be built fully to those standards. It's just that the zoning side of things is eased up on in order to allow them in our community.
The argument might be that you want housing, and there are mobile home parks that have that condition built into them with anti-earthquake stuff on them already. I understand. The goal low is to get housing.
Yeah, I think you need.
All right, one more question. I'll let
One more
Ted
question
finish
over
up.
here, yeah.
Does the applicant have to pay the same amount to the design firm as if they were doing it custom?
That's up to the design firm to figure out. The city doesn't control how much they charge. So we hope that designers go with lower rates on these than normal. I think there's every reason to, because they're basically already done. But yeah, the city doesn't have control over that. All right, so that's one example. Again, shout out to Adam Stickles. I think this is a really great Spanish colonial design that'll fit pretty much anywhere in the city. This one is from Rebecca Wiscombe at Bevy House, and these are modular units. So these can be constructed off-site, transported in, and plunked on-site. And the great benefit to that approach is that you save time and money in construction. I do know that transporting these units can be very expensive, so it's not like you get home free with no construction cost whatsoever, because you still have to transport it in and sometimes use a crane. That's a lot of money, but in general, the idea is that these are kind of plug and play. All right, so what's next? We're just about complete with the design review phase for the pre-approved ADUs that are in our process. It's been a lot of public hearings, and I really appreciate all you pre-approved ADU applicants who've stuck with it. Next is building code review. So all these plans will have to meet building code, and that review is going to happen between November and March. Hopefully in March 2025 or even sooner, we're going to have the pre-approved plans posted to the city website for folks to look at. And then in spring 2025, we hope to reopen the pre-approved ADU application submittal period. So firms like Buildston and Anacapa and others can hopefully submit their designs. And the idea, I think, is that we're going to be accepting them on a rolling basis going forward. And then later on, we'll look back and see what's worked and what hasn't with this program and just kind of keep improving it.
I have a question.
Sure.
So the city of Carpinteria already has these models, correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
The city of Carpinteria already has these ADU models over the counter, right?
I believe they do have a couple of pre-approved plans, yeah.
So I ran into a constituent and he had asked me that if he bought one of those pre-approved plans in Carpinteria and it was to the fit of his lot, could he technically get a permit here in the city of Santa Barbara to?
Unfortunately not. It has to be approved by the jurisdiction that it's getting permitted in.
Thank you.
Basically, he could apply with that, but it would go through the normal process.
Yeah, they could apply with that design, but it would go through the normal ADU process. So it wouldn't be pre-approved, but they could get it.
I mean, that is an
approved and built.
interesting concept. If you want to make ADUs easier for a community like ours, we have 4 different jurisdictions within, 20 miles. If you had similar approved designs throughout each of our jurisdictions, that would be a benefit to everyone, I think.
Yeah.
Let's let Ted finish up, and then we'll take the Q&A.
Yeah, I want to finish with one point that I think is really compelling, and that is that ADUs, get this, make up about 42% of all the housing units that have been constructed in Santa Barbara since 2018. So that's a really great land use. That's a really great way to disperse density so that you don't have, really, really tight density plunked down. It's a great way for folks to improve their properties. It's a relatively approachable way to get units. So I think that's a big win, and that, to me, reflects the success of the ADU law. So, yeah, I want to thank Coastal Housing Coalition and my fellow panelists for being here.
Thank you guys. We have a Q&A opportunity. Barry Tower is our board member. He'll run around with the mic, and we'll go from there.
All right. I may be wrong on this, but when the ADU legislation first came out, I believe there was some ruling that you couldn't build a second story if you had a single family residence. Is that gone away so you could build on top of your garage, which we've seen earlier, but can you also build a 2-story ADU if your residence is a single story?
Yeah, I'll take that question. The answer is yes, but it might be a tougher permit process, at least in the city. If you're constructing an ADU on the second story of an existing single-family home, then you probably most likely have to go through design review, which adds time and money to the permit process. But if you're constructing an ADU over a garage, and it's entirely over the garage, then that's allowed. You don't have to go through design review for that.
Can you do the reverse? So I'm coming up with a very small home on the market, and can you then add on, because it's close to 10,000 square foot lot, and build a house and then call that the ADU?
The city says no.
I think not. You could do a junior ADU.
A junior, so it would need to be attached then to do a junior, or no?
A junior ADU is constructed within the existing habitable area of a house.
Okay.
So you could potentially do an addition to your house and then permit that as an ADU.
Okay.
I wish it were I wish it were easier. I wish you could just do get a permit for the final thing that you want, which is an ADU, instead of having to go through the two-step process, but that's just the way our ordinance is written now.
Do you think there's any possibility that could be changed in the future? Or?
Yeah, and I think the state is putting new laws on local jurisdictions all the time, and we got to adapt. And I think that ADU production is a high priority for the city, as Councilwoman Gutierrez can attest to, and we want to get them built.
It would be nice. I will articulate right now. ADUs cannot be sold, right? So they can only be a rental. We're talking about what's in the future, what can help ADU production, what ideas that should go from here. There is a law. I think it's 1033, AB 1033, SB 1033. But the state has said you can sell an ADU. It's not mandatory that each jurisdiction do that, but they have the option. And I don't know, it's pretty fresh. I think SB 1033 might be like 9 months old or something. But there are jurisdictions that are adopting it so that ADUs can be sold. And, I think that's something our community should be thinking about. What a great Santa Barbara is expensive. What a great opportunity to allow people to, build equity into a community by buying a 600 square foot little ADU. It's complicated, I know. There's got to have homeowners association stuff, but I really think that that would be kind of one of these future improvements that I'd like to see in our community. Question here.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Craig. Not to put you on the spot, Ted, but I'm going to do so anyways. I wondered if the city has talked more about implementing 1033 as of late. The last time I had asked Brenda, she said, no, but maybe.
Rachel, that's about the same answer I've gotten. I'll be upfront with y'all. I can't afford a house in Santa Barbara, and the idea of being able to buy an ADU that someone's built on their lot is really compelling to me. So, you know, on a personal level, I have a lot of interest in that law and, you know, those equity propositions that brings up. I would say if there's interest in that in the community, you know, talk to city council, work with CHC, work with strong towns, bring it to the forefront of council's mind, and they'll direct staff to do it.
I will just add that I have a lot of clients that are designing with that in mind, so separating utilities, looking at like separation between the primary residences and the ADUs with that in mind for the long term, with the hope that that would come down from the local jurisdictions in the South Coast.
Yeah.
So I'll put that.
That's good to know.
Thank you. I mean, we need to assemble these ideas. It's something else I heard, I saw a mortgage broker I know posted the 2025 mortgage limits, right? I don't know if there's any mortgage brokers here. But for instance, you have a conforming and non-conforming. So for a single family house, the conforming loan rate was like $805,000. And then if you had 2 units, it was like 1.1. And I asked the mortgage broker, I said, oh, great, you know, the numbers went up. But does financing recognize an ADU as a second unit? So therefore, someone could be eligible for 1.1 million loan conforming, not the 800. And he said no. And I told him, I think that's a huge miss, right? Like if we really want to make this a difference here, these 60% are being used as rental units. So we, you know, I appreciate that. We need these ideas to be making ADUs more successful.
Craig, let me interrupt you real quick. Show of hands in this room. How many of you would support, if it was on the ballot, the sale of ADUs? I know it's a very general question, but I'm just curious in this room if you would support the fact if we allowed, please raise your hand high because I'm very curious without knowing it.
I think it would depend on what the zoning is.
Yeah, I get it's complex. I'm just curious in general purposes, because I go back to the whole idea of equity in the community and having the people we want here and having affordability. So I was just curious to see. Can one more time, just curious? Hands? Majority. Okay, okay, that's it. You have some?
Thank you. Sorry. Any other questions?
I would like to know how, like, mathematically that makes any sense. If you have a 10,000 square foot lot, by the time you build the ADU and sell it off, and by how much you're going to devalue your current residence, how would it make any sense to sell off the ADU? And I'm all for affordability. I'm just actually curious, because if you spend $600,000, now you got to sell it for $800,000. You're devaluing your property to what you could sell your property for. So.
No, I mean, it's a good point. I mean, I'm not sure anyone's done a pro forma on that yet, but you know, in concept, you have the land, you've already bought the land, and you're building the house, and now you're actually selling 2 units. So, you know, it would be interesting to know if it even is appealing from a financial perspective, but at this point, you can't even do it, so why study it?
This question's for the architects on the panel. Clearly, one of, if not the biggest challenges or problems with the ADU process is how onerous the city's plan review process is. What do you think the city should be doing to make the process better? What can they change? What can they improve?
You want to start? Sure. I do think that there is a level where, with the ADU process and, you know, really thinking through, like, there's like a fine line. What does 60 days of application review mean? It's, as Ted mentioned, it's when the application is deemed complete. I think being very transparent about some of that stuff, I think in the sense of this like pre-designed, pre-approved ADUs, 30 days is better, but I think it could go a lot further. I think allowing maybe for concurrent planning and building department submittal process review, even for those ADUs that do maybe require planning review and design review, allowing these designs to move forward at risk would shorten that process. Right now, I think we've noticed that in I think it was maybe 6 years ago, there was that stance to kind of like cut apart planning from building. And I think it was meant to expedite. And I think in the same senses of having to go through that, it has added a lot of complexity. I think the opposite has kind of resulted.
Noted.
Yeah.
I would add that the PLN process, right? We have to apply for a planning application, and there are these. There's a 30-day incomplete or complete letter that you get after review, and that process, along with what Kristen is saying, I think really slows things down and can really bog a project. I mean, it's why it takes a year to do these projects instead of 6 months. So I think that's one huge thing, is sort of re-examining the whole PLN process and how that works. The other is the need for 2 permits. When you're doing some improvements on the house, I mean, any property owner who's going to go that extra mile to create an ADU is undoubtedly also doing something on their primary residence. And to force that to be a separate permit, I think really causes difficulties of even producing the sets and splitting things up. I mean, like that one you showed, Kristen, that had the ADU right next to the house. Like, how do you know where to show this versus that when they're touching against each other? And how do you, anyway, I think we just need a more holistic approach when we're doing ADUs, just to recognize that it's an improvement to the site and allow for both permits to be all in one.
Good comment.
I think
if
in
I
some
could
cases,
respond to that real quick.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Real quick. That PLN process only applies to that 15% or so of ADUs that have to go through design review or some kind of discretionary process. 85% of them are just building permits, ministerial. And with regard to the separation of permits, that's a tough one for us too, because there is a route available. It's called a combined development agreement, and essentially it allows you to make improvements to your primary property and then also build your ADU under the same kind of umbrella approval. In theory, it sounds great, but in practice, it's not. And I agree. I think there should be ways to kind of expedite that kind of situation. And yeah, we could certainly do more about that.
That'd be great.
I think we have time for maybe two more questions.
Can you elaborate on that? Like, has there been internal discussions within planning to kind of help expedite this process? Because really, when I talk to clients and we say it's a year or 2 year process, that immediately shuts down the conversation. So has there been talks about that?
Yeah, and one thing I'd like to kind of highlight that's not necessarily related to ADUs is that the city's going through a process or an effort to kind of reform the way that the single family design board works. And a lot of these ADUs that are constructed on single family lots are subject to design review. So by reducing design review triggers and making that single family process better and more reasonable, we're hoping to see some ancillary effects that trickle down to ADU production as well, and yeah, make the PLN process a little bit easier for folks. Or eliminate it entirely and just let them go to building permit.
So I just have one comment on the side that's not really a question. So I have noted with clients in this multiple offer, offer them free 6 months to live in the house in order to get it accepted, that ADUs have created something, and yet they've removed some affordable housing, especially in Goleta, for people who don't need extra living space. Their kids are all of a certain age. They don't need a separate, they don't have people coming. So it is interesting that that has raised the price of a lot of homes because it has something extra, and a lot of my clients don't need the extra. So it's just kind of, it's tough to make everybody happy, but it is an offshoot of that.
Yeah.
I think we have to remember that we live in such an expensive community, and I will say my husband and I do not own our house. We hope to someday. But, you know, in the sense of like, what can we do? Like, if we were to find a property, what value add can we add? And I will say that like a lot of our clients at Anacapa, the way that we think about it ourselves is like an ADU. Like that seems like a way that we can bring a little extra value to that property in these like uncertain economic times. We see the real estate prices go up, go down, all that stuff, but for the most part, they are trending up. So it's like, how do you make sure that your investment that you put in now to buy a single family, 1,200 square foot house for $1.5 million, that you get some of that money back at the end of the day when you move on from it? Yeah. I think it's hard.
That's a good point. If I could afford a house, I would want to build an ADU probably.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see any further questions. So again, I want to say thank you for coming tonight. I hope that you enjoyed the panel. How about a round of applause for our panelists? And you are free to go. You're free to hang. We'll be cleaning up. I will remind you of our housing conference on December 5th. More information to come.
Like, 60 days, if you have to go through a year, that's like